quick spoiler warning for the Expanse in general. You've been warned. Alrighty then, let's get started. We're starting a new subseries of episodes looking at swapping out one starship with another at a key moment of their storyline and seeing how the battle or conflict at large will change. So to kick off the series, we're taking the MCRN Donnager and replacing it with the UNN Agatha King during the attack on Donnager, featured heavily in the 4th episode of the series. Any changes to the outcome will have serious consequences going forward on the series at large. So without further ado, to make this scenario plausible, some preceding events will likely have to change or take place. Specifically, Admiral Souther would likely have to leave the UN Security Council a lot earlier than the original timeline to be in command of the Agatha King at the right time, as would likely be in character for him to investigate and save the survivors of the Canterbury. With the ship now where it needs to be, we'll move on to comparing the two flagships to see how the King can stack up to the Donny. The UNN's Truman class, of which the Agatha King is one, is a very capable vessel with a somewhat similar design philosophy to that of the MCRN's own Donnager class, though only 2/3 its size and loadout. It's only 376 meters in length to the Donny's 475.5 meters, which is still quite large for a warship in the Expanse, though the smaller size will hurt in the battle. Being equipped with 9 torpedo launchers versus the Donny's 14, or 42 PDCs instead of 59, and a pair of heavy railguns as opposed to ultra heavy. The ship is incredibly powerful, though still far outclassed by the Donnager in terms of firepower. One final major consequence of its smaller size is that it can't carry any frigates or destroyers in its hangars, only short-range skiffs and shuttles. In summary, it would realistically take 2 or 3 Truman class to take on one Donnager class with such a power differential. On a side note, believing the attack to have been done by Mars, being picked up by an Earth vessel would likely mean that Holden's famous "Remember the Can't" message would never have been sent, leaving the solar system at large to be left in the dark even more so than the original timeline. And now for the battle itself. Directly following the destruction of the Canterbury, the investigating Agatha King, having picked up the survivors, would be targeted by Protogen's 6 Amun-Ra class stealth frigates, much as with the Donnager. As the vessels would approach one another, the stealth ships would jam the King and open fire with about a dozen torpedoes. Souther, though likely hesitant, would fire over a dozen back. So far it's pretty much the same between the two timelines, however the difference of Earth and Martian technology will mark the beginning of a different path. The King's torpedoes, being far less advanced, would all be shot down by the attacking stealth ships, leaving all 6 intact to continue the assault. However, the King wouldn't have fared as well as the Donny. Instead of just a couple hits with minor to moderate damage, 4 or 5 easy hits would heavily damage the doomed Agatha King. Having crippled the battleship, both sides would be engaged in a limited CQB, exchanging PDC weapons fire, with the King losing turrets and power much quicker than the Donny did. Souther may try to use its railguns, though with the ship quickly losing power, it would likely not work. With a bit of luck though, one of the stealth ships would eventually be taken out by the PDC fire. Even as the Agatha King finally managed to score its first victory, it would also prove to be its only. With power, engines, and all critical systems damaged beyond repair, the 5 surviving stealth ships would launch far more boarding parties than the 2 ships that survived the CQB with the Donny. This would lead to a much shorter battle for control of the King, possibly fast enough to prevent a Condition 0. This would leave Souther, his crew, Holden and company all at the mercy of the Protogen forces, likely killed or experimented on. With no long-range vessels on board to escape on, the key bit of info to unlocking the secret of who destroyed the Cant would be lost with the vessel. With all these major players taken off the board so early in the story, this would have major ramifications down the line. Without going too far into the realm of speculation, with the mysterious loss of a key ice hauler and a UNN flagship of all, the solar system would easily be even more of a powder keg with all 3 factions pointing guns at each other. Without the rational influence of Souther at the UN Security Council, the UNN would likely begin moves towards an even more aggressive UN-MCR war than was in the normal timeline. This war could easily lead to a near total destruction of both navies, as in the normal timeline the hostilities ended before it could escalate too far. Protogen, however, would have retained their small but powerful fleet, but the experiment on Eros would be a very different story. With no Rocinante to guide the UNN's planet-busting missiles to the asteroid, Eros would have made it all the way to Earth, devastating the biosphere and eventual setup of the ring gate. While militarily exhausted, the MCR and rising OPA would likely take advantage of the UN being functionally destroyed, and thus explore and eventually expand throughout the ring gate system, leaving the OPA and MCR likely being the reigning superpowers for the foreseeable future. Yeah, the Agatha King and the UN at large would likely have gotten the shorter end of the stick if it was them who had gone out to help out Holden. If you'd like to see more starship swaps or breakdowns on a future episode, go ahead and comment below. Thanks for watching today's episode, I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to support First Pass on Patreon, Like and subscribe for more content, and remember, this was your first pass at the Agatha King swapping out with the Donnager.